When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you want to learn methods to transform your life and actively grow into the potential you know is inside of you, then you're in the right place. Welcome to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. I'm a psychedelic integration and transformation coach and breathwork facilitator, as well as an enthusiast of personal growth. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on this journey. This podcast will help you learn about new methods to bring into your life, give you practices to follow, and share stories from practitioners who are doing the work so that you feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. And on this sort of first episode that's made for YouTube, we're using a new format. I have a very special guest, my partner, Ayahuasca Kaur. And this is sort of tradition for this show. I was the first guest on the first episode of the podcast. And then when I switched the format, she was the first guest there. And now as we go into this next chapter, here we are again. And so much has changed since the last time we spoke on the podcast together. And so I'm really excited to have her here. So just to let you guys know a little bit more about her, Ayahuasca Kaur, whose birth name is Saraydar Bondi, is a licensed clinical social worker and a trauma-informed ayahuasca preparation and integration coach. She's taken her years of being a trauma therapist and began to intentionally apply her knowledge to the ayahuasca path beginning in 2016 when she herself experienced the power of ayahuasca. She struggled to deeply integrate the lessons that she learned in the beginning and began to pay attention to what really worked. And over the years, she's come up with a blend of mindfulness, breathwork, inner child, and reparenting, as well as one of the things we'll be talking about today, EMDR, to assist her clients and students with making long-lasting changes on the ayahuasca path. Ms. Kaur does ayahuasca preparation and integration work with individuals and with groups. And we'll leave a link to check out her offerings on the show page. So Aya, welcome back to The Vital Point.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I feel kind of nervous, but I am really excited to talk about all things ayahuasca and yeah, let some people know a little bit about the world of EMDR and what that could potentially provide for them.
Yeah. This conversation, this desire to have another episode of the podcast together really came about recently through an MDMA experience that we shared. And we were sitting outside enjoying the day, and we started to talk about all the things that have changed. You know, you went through a big experience this last year has been a huge change for you, but since the last time we did a podcast together, you went through this big initiation in Peru. And so maybe we could just start there.
Last year, I went to the jungles of Peru to deepen my relationship and my understanding of this medicine. And I went through like a 2-month program where we did 2 master plant diets, and then also we drank ayahuasca 3 times a week. And for me, being a person who eventually wants to facilitate ceremony, I was seeking a lot of confidence. I had a lot of self-worth blocks, a lot of I could never do this, so I really wanted to be disconnected from my everyday familiar surroundings and really just be in an environment where this is where I was learning day in, day out, to really build an embodiment of it, and I can't say I'm there even just yet in terms of feeling confident of serving the medicine, but definitely had a huge transformation. Um, and just to kind of connect the EMDR component, right? Um, so that all started in 2015 when I had just graduated with my master's in social work, and I was on the path to be a therapist, or that's what I thought I was doing, and there was a lot of trauma that was coming up because I got this job at this treatment center that I went to go work at. And in this inpatient treatment center, they focused on trauma and addiction. And yeah, so I was just getting triggered. All this stuff was coming up because I was in this environment, and then my work ended up paying for an EMDR training. And just like anything that I first learned, I'm very skeptical of it. And EMDR was definitely something that I thought was straight out of a cult. I was like, this is super weird. How could waving a hand in front of somebody's eyes? I just thought it was really bizarre. And I was like, whatever, my work is paying for it. And by the end of this 2 day training, I literally was bawling my eyes out, and I was able to discover things about myself that I didn't even know. So that's when I was like, okay, cool. Got my own therapist, started doing this really deep work in EMDR land, and that was extremely profound. I was totally sold on it. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And then at the same time, I was in a 12-step program called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And at some point, I got to a place in my healing that I just knew I couldn't access a certain aspect of myself. Although I was looking back on it, I was in my infancy of healing. I was only 6 months in, but my impatient personality was just like, there's got to be something else. And I was working with a mentor at that time that introduced me to ayahuasca. And yeah, so, and then 6 months after she told me about it, I I decided to sit with ayahuasca for the first time. So hopefully that was I was trying to keep it as short as possible, but hopefully that kind of gives a lay of the land for people.
No, that was great. I really want to go
Hmm.
more into the
Uh-huh.
EMDR first
Yeah.
because that's what kind of sparked this conversation
Hmm.
between us about how I think you were saying something about the EMDR almost being like a
Yep.
psychedelic, like being, and we've talked about this. You've reminded me of it several
Hmm.
times about that EMDR is an expanded state of consciousness in and of
Yes.
itself.
Yeah.
So so tell me more about how that works because I'm an EMDR novice.
Hmm.
We've explored it a little
Hmm.
bit. You've helped me explore it a little bit in terms of anchoring in positive
Yes, yes.
things.
Which we will be doing that today.
And yeah, and so that's something that's new for me in my
Hmm. Hmm.
practice and has been like a big game changer. And this is coming after several years of somatic therapy and my own medicine work
Yeah.
and just this idea that I could use therapeutic resources to like create
Hmm.
positive
Hmm.
interactions and positive associations rather than this is just something that I'm doing to like clear the shit
Clear.
out,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
It has been a big game changer for me and it's something that I'm continuing to explore and EMDR is one way that we've done
Totally.
that. But can you go into like sort of the mechanics of
Yeah,
EMDR a
yeah.
little bit more and what it's
Yeah,
used
let's do
for?
it. So, yeah, let's go back to 1988 because we definitely want to reference, Francine Shapiro, who's the creator of EMDR. And so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so, um, Dr. Francine Shapiro, who actually isn't with us anymore, she passed away a couple years ago. In her, while she was in her clinical psychology work in her program, she got cancer. And while she was walking in the park one day and she was thinking about, like, damn, I have cancer. Like, this isn't fun, right? She was shifting her eyes from left to right. And she noticed as she was doing this that her feelings of having cancer seemed less intense, more neutral, more manageable. And I always find this story like mind blowing because it's like, well, she just took that. I mean, that's what you do in a PhD program. You're a researcher, right? So she just took her own experience and took it right to the lab, and she basically started testing out this theory on people. And then eventually it became a full therapy that she rolled out. And it actually took EMDR quite some time before it was actually respected. A lot of people had the same mindset as me that were like, what? Okay, like, yeah, right. But so the theory and the science behind EMDR is that, so originally it was you would follow somebody's hand and you would shift your eyes from left to right, okay? And so in that mimics something that we do organically and naturally at night, which is when we go into REM, right? Rapid eye movement. And that's where we naturally process the day, and then we have access to the subconscious mind. Other people call it the dream state or the upper worlds, or, you can throw around lots of different language around this, but for the purposes of this conversation, the subconscious mind. And so, essentially, what EMDR does is that it intentionally uses this process to help somebody, like, work through memories of the past that are clouding their present. So here's an analogy. A lot of us are walking around with different lenses of I'm not good enough, I'm not safe, I'm not in control, and that is downloaded into our thoughts and then into our central nervous systems, right? We all have somatic imprints from childhood, meaning maybe we're stuck in fight or flight, and then we have these core beliefs. So what EMDR, there's a lot of processes that go into it. There's actually 8 phases to the process. But long story short, because I just really want to stick to like the potent, the most relevant stuff for the listener, is like basically, say little Joey comes to therapy or coaching or whatever context he's coming in, and he's telling the person, like, I keep ending up in these relationships where I'm not treated well, and I feel like I cope a lot with alcohol, and I'm always in fear, I'm always anxious. Okay, so the person who's working with little Joey, or Joey, I don't know why I said little, maybe I'm referring to his inner child already, anyway, but he's like, they're like listening, they're obviously taking in all the information. But what an EMDR practitioner is doing is they're watching and assessing for how this present experience is perhaps maybe related to something that's in the subconscious mind that's like stuck and not aware, and it just keeps replaying, so so everything said and done, say this person's a perfect candidate, because you don't just go into this part with a person, you got to make sure that they're ready. They like go into a specific memory and say there was a memory, we won't give details, but basically it was a memory of I'm not good enough, and then the intensity around this memory was like 10 out of 10, whatever that was for this guy Joey. And so what EMDR does is that it targets that memory specifically, and in the process of that bilateral stimulation, it's actually opening it up. So this person, it's no longer locked in a particular way, which is what traumatic memories end up being. And it's just like kind of, it plays in a loop. So the EMDR allows someone to go in, to open it up, and to look at it in different angles and to separate themselves from it and to actually process through the stuck emotions so they can complete the cycle, right? And so there's in EMDR, there's three measures. The first one is the intensity. So the first goal is to neutralize the memory that no longer holds the weight anymore. The second step is to change the core belief, not just on a mental level, which is what cognitive behavioral therapy does. It's actually on, there's an actual measure that's built into the model that is how much do you believe that? So if we're changing it to I'm good enough, how much do I actually believe that? And we want to get that 7 out of 7, full conviction. The last part is the body feels fully clear now. So, and this is all done through, if you're doing it via, telehealth, which is what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years, you just do a tapping process like this. And then there's also lots of technology mechanisms that facilitate the bilateral stimulation. Um, and I know this is like kind of maybe too much psychological mumbo jumbo jargon, but essentially what this ends up doing for somebody is they are free. They're emotionally free from their past. And it helps, because now we know, because, you can also speak to this, like you've done a lot of somatic experiencing. We now know that talking about things is great, but it's very limited and actually transforming somebody on a very deep level that they feel empowered by. And now this is why psychedelics and plant medicines are so profound, because it gives somebody a direct experience of that trauma, and they get to, right? They get to heal it within, they get to overcome it within. So this whole process facilitates all of that on a somatic level, a mental level, on an authentic and conviction level, so the client can feel empowered, and now those lenses change in everyday life. I am good enough. I can separate that was something that happened in my past. It is not happening anymore. These are things that with trauma, it's hard to flush out, but with the EMDR, they're able to start to see, like, really reclaim their identity and their parts of themselves. And yeah, so that's the short version of it. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
So by allowing the client to re-experience the memory in a safe way, they're able to process and maybe complete. And it also sounds like they're able to see it from different perspectives. Like instead of sort of, because that's something about trauma, right? Is that we get locked into a specific way that we viewed it.
Yes.
And we're not able to like be the observer.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
We're in the middle of the storm.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad that you brought up like how psychedelics can work together with this process, because when you were talking, that was like one of the things that came up was like, I was like, well, this sounds like you're describing MDMA for sure. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We were recently watching the How to Change Your Mind, and there was that quote in there of the patient saying, it feels like I can like examine being sad without being sad.
Yes.
And we've talked about that, right? About like how we're able to observe emotions that are somewhat overwhelming when we're not in the medicine space, but like the emotionality is taken out of it.
Right.
You're just able to view it from a very neutral perspective, and therefore not get caught up in some sort of story about it.
Yeah. I would say with the EMDR in particular, like you definitely will feel it. So not to confuse the listeners, like it's uncomfortable, so that's why we didn't touch on this, where I first heard the words preparation and integration were actually in the world of EMDR. So you don't go to this place where I just took everyone through right away. You prep the person with mindfulness, with breathing exercises, basically with self-regulation, right? because as only one could imagine, um, just throwing somebody into a place of chaos, which is what trauma is. It is dysregulating. It is dissociative by nature. It is all these things, especially with childhood trauma, which is what I usually help people work with. Although I do some present day stuff as well. But um, so you want to prep them. You want to prep them, and then you want to, and let them know that, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to give you a chance to work through it, so it's filed differently. Because a lot of times with these memories that we're carrying, it's with the child perspective that didn't have anyone to borrow from. Not safety, not security, no regulation. This is like often happening like in dysfunctional homes where the parent is not parenting, or at least that's what I end up working a lot with. And so, but the child mind is limited. They don't have the ability to reflect and see the future. But when we go back in, someone now with more experience, they can go back and help that child, teenager, whatever the younger part is, to give them that new and like more, like you said, complete perspective. So it feels finished. I can move forward.
Okay, so that's interesting. The preparation and integration came before you were working with, more with ayahuasca. So you're able
Right.
to apply those skills and that language and those resources into plant medicine work.
Yes.
So how different is the preparation then? Would you say it's pretty similar?
Preparation for ayahuasca in comparison to EMDR.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I would say really similar. I mean, I don't know how other people practice. I think people need to remember that, like, what I've put together is really based on science that I've learned about from the world of trauma and the pioneers in it, like Dr. Levine and Dr. Stephen Porras and, Dr. Richard Schwartz, like all of that. And then being this Westerner who's taken ayahuasca, so I've just kind of made these parallels in my head, that's what I wanted to say about that. But I would say very similar because EMDR is a non-ordinary state of consciousness, although you are very much more in control than you are in ayahuasca land, but both have an element of we are taking off the masks. We are going into the deeper waters. We are letting go of defenses and protector parts, right? So, in both in in both lands, ayahuasca land and EMDR land, you want to, make sure somebody has a mindfulness practice and they know how to regulate. You want to, when I prep someone for EMDR, we intentionally talk about it, but I put them through some stressful events, like let's go through some stressors and do something called pendulating, when you intentionally take somebody through a stressful experience internally and then you bring them back down into center, and we do that, so they know what it's like. Okay, this is me feeling activated, and now can I come back down, right? And that's gonna, in EMDR land, that's definitely gonna happen in ayahuasca land. Your temperature changes, you're seeing visions, someone or something's talking to you, all sorts of things, right? Like, and depending on the setting, if you're in a group versus alone, all these things, um, definitely taking an assessment of the family trauma and what's happened. I mean, I if I'm working with somebody, I definitely make them very aware that, like, hey, this very much could be a piece that comes up in your ceremony. Doesn't mean it's going to, but come on now, like, like it's like this medicine really makes you work deeply, So,
Hmm.
um, I would say one component of ayahuasca preparation that isn't really connected to EMDR is the diet, the ayahuasca healing diet where you eat the clean foods and no salt, no sugar, no oils, refraining from sex, making boundaries with your phone and TV and how many stressful things you're letting in, all of that. Um,
Hmm.
but I think if I guess the best analogy or but kind of way to think about it, if you were going to put non-ordinary states of consciousness on a spectrum, you'd probably see EMDR more to the left and on the lower level, and ayahuasca would be on the more, I guess you would say, extreme. So yeah, I even think EMDR would be a great way to prep somebody for ayahuasca, and I do that as well as the transformational breath work.
Yeah, actually, as you were talking about it, I was really, that's what came up was like, it almost sounds like with EMDR, you could create kind of a roadmap of some of the things that somebody might encounter, especially if they're going into the ayahuasca experience specifically for healing
Right.
and healing trauma.
Totally.
So like you're not necessarily like choreographing the medicine experience,
Right.
but you're creating some of the major marks on the landscape that could
Correct.
possibly come up. And in that way, you're almost prepping them for like, hey, this is, have some awareness around this.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to like if you were going to go to the gym and you had a shoulder injury, you would adjust your programming around that. Like first week out of that injury, you might not do any shoulders, or weeks in, you might say, okay, well, I'm going to stay away from this particular exercise, or at least have some
Yep.
awareness, so that when I'm moving that joint, I'm
Yes.
aware of what's happening in my body.
No, I think you said it perfectly. Like, yeah. So when I work with people, I mean, I work as mainly as a coach now, but I still take in my therapy framework. So I
Hmm.
get like a full background on somebody, and so I'm really looking for what's happened in the past and how much inner work have they done, and um, so if they are interested in ayahuasca either sooner or later, we definitely look at that and be like, hey, like let's start working on this, and then that will free up some space in ceremony. You can go deeper into other things you want because you've kind of cleared this. Of course, that's all theoretical and analogy because, like, I don't want to sit here and act like I'm smarter than ayahuasca or I can predict what's going to happen. But in terms of someone's ability to be resilient and their central nervous system to be more flexible and resilient and more grounded in things, those are things we can control. Like that's what I'm all about in the preparation and integration is like how much empowerment can I give my client or my student? How much tools and resources can I give them to weather the unknown? Which that is what ayahuasca land is. It's like we can sit here all day and talk about like what is or what isn't going to happen.
Hmm.
But it's like, when a client comes back or a student, they're like, I saw aliens. It's like, okay, cool, let's unpack that, because that had nothing to do with what we were talking about or
Right.
seemingly. But yes, I think having exposure to these things, not just the everyday ordinary reality, you know, and to get into other places where they got to work through this because yeah, so I love how you said it can definitely be a roadmap for so many things.
And I love how what you just touched on there in terms of like working with your clients and empowering your clients, because we were talking before the show, about what your vital point is
Oh,
for
yes.
working, for working with your clients.
Yeah.
And we talked about the having the ability to calm, regulate, and anchor those peak experiences.
Yeah, yeah. That
And
was
to me, that's such a powerful thing, because, and it's one of the things that I love discussing with you. I feel like we're on the same page about is these non-ordinary states of consciousness are incredible, but like, what are you doing with that afterwards?
Right.
You know, what kind of change are you actually creating in your life through them?
Right.
Or are you just sitting in the same ceremony over and over again, basically?
Right. And I mean, and then I love how you said that because I feel like that's a perfect statement for like, am I sitting in the same stuck cycle in my life? Because that's
Hmm.
what it ends up being, right? It's a mirror of what's already happening in your life. So if you feel stuck in ceremony, you probably feel stuck in your life. It's very I mean that's at least what ayahuasca has taught me is like there's it's a training ground for so many different things.
But yeah, the things that come up in ceremony being a mirror for the things that come up in our life.
Hmm.
You know, it's just it's such an important idea. I mean, I often talk about that within the breathwork context to people as well.
Yeah.
You know, if there's something that they're really feeling stuck about in the breath work and they just feel like they can't move through it, well, like,
Right.
how else, where else does this come up in your life? Does this come up in other places? And they're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
actually it does.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And I love
Yes.
one of my breathwork teachers, he would describe the breathwork process as going to the surrender gym. You know, that's
Oh.
literally all you're doing is just learning to surrender and be open to whatever's coming up,
Right.
including the fact that it's not always going to be like, oh my God, it was so visionary. And like, I saw visions and downloads and it was great and it was beautiful. Like, sometimes it's going to
Right.
be challenging. And sometimes
Yeah.
maybe nothing's going to come up. And then how are you going to deal with that? Like, is that something that's going to bother you? Are you going to
Yeah.
be able to
Yeah.
accept like, okay, this is what happened today, you
Yeah. Yeah.
know? And
Totally.
in that same way that these ceremonies are little mirrors for what's happening in our life.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, and I'll just say one more bit after that, because yeah, exactly. No matter what the non-ordinary state is, EMDR, breathwork, ayahuasca, it's all. I believe it's all that, Um, and I think just to kind of touch on this, like, yeah, because there's a difference between a challenging ceremony and a ceremony that we feel like was overwhelming or we were unresourced for. And that's when
Mm,
trauma happens. When we're unprepared and unresourced, too much, too fast, too soon. That's what trauma is, right?
right.
And yeah, and like, we got to be careful in these like medicine spaces and like you don't want to recreate an experience. So anyway, what I'm trying to get at is my saying is always dose slow to grow. There's like be careful because that's really influencing you and going into these experiences being as resourced and as prepared as possible, that will allow somebody to access more of themselves rather than creating this, more stuff for somebody to work through.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
So you
We're
have
excited.
generously offered to guide a little EMDR practice that
Yes.
listeners can do at home.
Yes. Yeah. Depending on how much time we have, I have a couple. So the first one, you can use um, anytime you're having an experience that you want to remember or anchor. And that can be, in the moment, or it can be like, oh man, I forgot to do that. So let's anchor it now. So it could be happening in real time, or it can be a memory of either a peak experience of whatever that is. It could be in the ayahuasca space or not. But just any sort of experience that you want to remember and anchor and create an internal resource for yourself. And this can be anything. So basically, you can just momentarily take a moment to think about an experience that you felt expanded, or a lot of gratitude, or you felt very empowered, um, or maybe someone, really helped you, whatever that is. So just take a moment to think about something you would like to anchor, and let me know, Jonathan, when you have that. And listeners out there, just take a moment when you have that, and then we will do the next step.
Okay.
You got it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share or no?
No, I think I'll keep it.
Okay, that's by the way, guys, this is the beauty of EMDR, is that you actually would never have to say a peep of your experience to somebody. So that's also why I love this practice. So, um, so just take a moment to go deeper into that. And this is just a way of priming your mind and your body, but just to bring the visual forward of whatever you're anchoring, and then just using all your five senses. So how you feel about it emotionally, how does it feel in your body? Does it have a smell? Is there a taste? Can you hear something in particular? And just more and more detail going into it, just drawing it up like into your body. And when you feel like you really got it, just let me know.
Okay, I got it. And for
You got it?
for
Okay.
those, if you're following along with this practice, don't be afraid to pause for a second and give yourself the time that you need.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thanks for saying that. Okay, cool. So now what we'll do, this will do the tapping part, okay? So you can do it across your chest like this, and really you can just, and for those of you who are listening or watching, you can just cross your hands across your chest, and then you tap on your shoulders kind of at a pace of 1 2 1 2 1 2, and you're just tapping. And as you're tapping, you're really focusing on whatever you're anchoring. Yeah, just like that. And at first, for those of you who are doing this totally brand new, it's going to feel like you're patting your head and rubbing your belly. So there's a lot happening, and just know that will pass. Yeah, so breathing nice and deep as you're doing it as well. Just breathing into it. We always want to use the breath with everything we do. Jonathan's doing a great job getting into it. And just keep going. I'll let you know when to stop. Okay, good. So go ahead and take a pause. Nice big deep breath in and out. Nice. And just take a moment and reflect with yourself, Jonathan, just what you noticed in that round. And for those of you who are listening, this is exactly what you'll do. You'll tap anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes on each round, and then you'll take a nice deep breath, pause, reflect, and then you'll want to go back in. So do you feel ready to go back in, Jonathan? Okay, so whenever you're ready, just pull up that anchor, noticing the visuals, sensations, feelings, and whenever you're ready, just go ahead and start tapping. just really breathe nice and deep as you're doing that. Good. Go ahead and pause and go and take a nice big deep breath in and out. And once again, just noticing what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. Nice. And we'll just do one more round. So whenever you're ready, same thing, drawing up that anchor. And whenever you're ready, just go ahead and start tapping. Good. Go ahead and pause. Take a nice big deep breath in and out. Yeah, and you can just relax your arms and just take a moment to notice what you're feeling and what you're sensing. And just taking a moment to just like name this anchor, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy unless you want it to be, just something you can remember. So maybe it's dreamland or forest or lavender field, but just something that you can help you associate that place with. And then you can just slowly bring awareness to your eyes. And then whenever you're ready, you can come back to the room. Yeah. How are you feeling?
I feel good. It was interesting to notice the difference in each round.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I didn't pick the best thing to anchor in, but it was something that I'm working on anchoring, but it's like also like a limiting belief that I'm changing. And so
Okay.
I picked an example of when I disproved that limiting belief and like celebrating the more
Yes.
expanded belief,
Uh-huh.
you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
like the first round, I kind of felt maybe some tension or some churning.
Mm-hmm.
Like I sort of
Sure.
felt
You
like
were
that limiting kind of.
processing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Uh-huh. Yeah,
then
yeah,
the
yeah.
second round, I felt like more what I would say positive kind of sensations. And then the third
Mm.
round, there was like a lot of like inner affirmations that were coming up along with the sensations.
Mm. Yes.
So
Yes.
it was interesting to notice the change.
Yeah, totally. And know that you can continue to deepen that, and whoever's listening to whatever anchor you're working on, we would usually do that for much longer. We did pretty short rounds, but for the sake of time, so If you're doing it on your own, you just get a stopwatch, put that in front of you, do like 2 to 3 minute rounds. I didn't want to keep everyone here forever. So we did like 30, 45-second rounds. And you can do that and go deeper and deeper each time. And it is different every round. And in fact, every EMDR session is completely different. And that's also the other mirror of the psychedelic realm, is that it's never the same. You know, um, it does sound like you were processing for sure, Um, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm having some. I'm just reconnecting my headset. Okay,
Okay,
there we go.
no worries. So for people who are anchoring that, anchoring whatever that peak experience is, really just focusing on the positive aspects, and we really do want it to be a peak experience because as you can see, it sounds like there's a part of that peak experience that you're struggling with. So if we were working together, we would probably we would actually process that. We would go deeper into processing rather than like that's a pure like internal positive resource,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so the tapping can be done with any peak experience, and um, especially in the medicine space, I can't tell you how many times where I'm like, whoa, wait, slow down. Like, I really want to remember this. Like, this is amazing, and like you take your hands anywhere, you know, and just tap that in and be like, I don't want to forget this. Like, and you can just mantra whatever is happening to really anchor that in. And I didn't mention it, but you can also do it on your knees. You don't have to do it across your chest if you don't want to. So you can do it on your knees as well. Um, yeah, but that's at least one of the things. There's a bunch of different things you can do with EMDR, but that's just one thing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I had two questions maybe
Yeah,
to clarify for
sure.
people. So, does it matter like how hard you're tapping? Like, does it need to be really firm,
Oh,
or can it be pretty light? Is there any sort of difference?
that's a great question. I would say you want to feel
Okay.
it. You want to feel it. Yeah. Yeah, and like yeah, and I like you want to play with different things. Like you can play with the speed,
That was my second
and
question.
kind of speed it up, and the pressure. But you definitely want to feel it, and it is something like you kind of want to feel connected to. But what I usually do, I start off people with like a 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, and you do want to feel it. You want to feel it. You want to feel connected to it. You want to feel like it's taking you deeper into something because with each round, the experience, I don't want to use the word should, but I will. It should be you feel like you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into it. You can see more, you can feel more. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Thank you for offering that, and I hope that this inspired you, the listener or watcher, I guess now,
Yeah.
to try it out because it is something that has been really helpful, and like you said, something that we've, especially that anchoring, not working with
Yes.
trauma, but the anchoring, used in the medicine experience to help ground and help remember.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to make a distinction for people, um, yeah, I mean, I would say don't start processing your traumas on your own. Like I'm not trying to disempower anybody, but it's like it can feel, kind of weird and like, whoa, if like, you haven't gone through the process with somebody. So the skill that I'm sharing is really meant for positive resourcing rather than going into, um, processing on your own, if that makes
Yeah, and I
sense.
think it's important, like what we were talking about earlier, in terms of just defining that trauma, right? Like, there's the
Yeah.
the medicine experience or an altered state of consciousness can be re-traumatizing if we're not prepared for it, because the trauma isn't
Totally.
exactly what's happening, it's our reaction to it and our ability to hold it or not. You know, if our system is getting
Yes,
overwhelmed. It was something I've been thinking about a lot,
exactly.
like somebody that's
Hmm.
like a soldier, for instance. Like a soldier
Yeah.
has more training around that resilience,
Hmm.
about being in this super activated state,
Uh-huh.
right? So I
Uh-huh.
would probably have a different reaction in terms of the trauma that I would
Hmm.
experience being put into a situation that might be not so dysregulating or not so alarming to a soldier. You know, and that's
Right.
not to
Totally.
discount anybody's experience. Obviously soldiers are experiencing PTSD and trauma from their experiences
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, but there's also a certain amount of like training and
Yes.
familiarity with the situation that they're receiving as a part of their job.
Yes.
So it's all kind of relative, right?
Great analogy. I think it's a great analogy. You know, it's like, yeah, you're definitely, when I work with people, you are being like, hey, this is what it's going to be like. Like, you can't tell them exactly, right? Just like a soldier, you can't say exactly what's going to happen, but like, hey, these are some of the things you might face. This is how, some of the ways you might feel. This is what to expect in EMDR land. This is what to expect in ayahuasca land. You know, so you're priming them, getting them
Yeah.
ready, you know, and so they know what to expect. Because that is a big part of the central nervous system, and feeling ready for something and knowing how to hold it is knowing what is to come,
Yeah.
you know, not all the way, but you know, somewhat to navigate what's
Yeah.
happening.
Well, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk
Yeah.
about your ayahuasca trauma informed group preparation and integration
Yeah.
container, because you're just finishing the first
Yeah.
cohort. Are you all the way done now, or you have
Yeah.
one more session?
We have one
Okay,
more
cool.
week. We have one more week, the closing ceremony. Yeah, so Jonathan will put the link down for you guys, but yeah, so the 3 month self empowerment and transformation ayahuasca preparation and integration intensive. It's a 90-day, 3 month container that's really for ayahuasca preparation and integration. You know, you get effective skills, tools like mindfulness, breath work, inner child, and reparenting work so that you can really know how to integrate this stuff, you know, and like if you've never taken the medicine, it's never, you know, now is the best time to start integrating with your preparation because a good preparation leads to a solid integration. And this has really been created out of my own experience and kind of what I've seen. There's so much confusion in the ayahuasca community, you know, post ceremony, dealing with the afterglow, which is when that experience of like, oh, all my problems are vanished, and you know, and then all of a sudden they return, you know. So having it's all about, you know, for me, that's why it's called self empowerment because I share how to. It's all about the how to. So everyone in the group learns how to embody the tools. They know what to do so they can be self-healers in this journey of ayahuasca, you know, and it's so that people can really manifest whatever their soul's calling is. Ayahuasca removes all the masks, right? The trauma, the social programming. Now I know who I am. Okay, now what do I go do with it? Right? Because it's not like those 27 or 20 plus or 40 years of who you thought you were aren't going away. That's why we call it integration because we have to take what we've learned and what we've been and how do I truly change. And it takes time, right? So that's why you get lots of attention. You get I mean, two times a week, 3 hours a week, basically between me and the group. So we're doing breath work every other week. We're doing mindfulness, inner child work, learning about the central nervous system. We do a 1 week healing diet together. And last but not least, a lot of people who do this work feel called to be of service. They want to give the gift of healing and transformation to somebody else. So everyone gets certified an online breathwork in the program so they can share, they go through all this like beautiful transformation of themselves and then being able to share that with others and so much more. So all the details are in the link that Jonathan will share. And then people can just reach out to me if they want to do one-on-one. Maybe they're not interested in the group. There's limited capacity for the group. Everyone has to apply, and 10 are accepted for each cohort, because I have found that I really do want to keep these containers really intimate and small. I feel like over 10, I can't really, give the attention, or the group kind of gets lost. And so yeah, and it's I was just telling the group, it's really weird to live your life in a way where a plant is telling you what to do with it. To be super honest with you. So it's been a wild ride. I'm just so grateful. And yeah, I feel really called to strictly work with people who are on the ayahuasca path, because it's really touched me in a way that I don't really think I fully have understood just yet. I think that's unfolding every single day right in front of my eyes.
What would you say is the most surprising thing that you've learned doing a group container as opposed to working with individual clients?
The power of the community transformation. And that's what the ayahuasca told me. It's like, it's great to work one-on-one. I love it. And some people, they're sensitive and they're not ready for a group. And that's why I offer that still, and that's totally okay. But that's the one thing that, just what the group does for each other, and how much love and support, and how everyone's healing in that group is everyone's healing. Everyone's share is medicine for everybody, and everyone's learning from each other. Everyone's supporting one another. They're doing things that I would have never even thought of, the insights that they offer, and watching each other, like, hold each other. There's breakdowns for a breakthrough, right? So people being vulnerable, sharing, going deep with each other, like really deep. I remember we were in our second week and they were already going deep with each other. So I'm like, wow, this is incredible. I wasn't expecting this till like the second month. So it's yeah, I think just that group healing component has been really, I don't even know if I have words for it, but it's just been incredible to witness.
Well, it's been incredible for me to witness, the growth that you've been going through over the last year, and, you having the courage to go to Peru. And I feel like we could have a whole nother podcast about, like, I keep hearing this topic coming up about, like, should indigenous culture, like, stay pristine, or, like, how is it changing as it comes into the West? And I feel like you're, like, a really good person to talk about that, because here you are, you've been initiated into this, indigenous lineage, but you're also applying these Western and modern tools and resources that we have in order to, like, help process what comes up. It's, and we've talked about this before too, of, like, well, it's great to go and experience the medicine in its, native environment, but you're not a native. You're not going to become a native in one night or 1 week or, a couple months even. So, like, how are we as Westerners processing that, and, like, how is it changing? It's, to me, it's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I feel like we really could do probably another good 2 to 3 hours just on that. I I am really thankful to the indigenous people for making this practice known, and not just for me, but for thousands and thousands of other people to have access to. There's many paths to liberation in this life. And this has just been the path that has called to me. I didn't ask for it. I really didn't. Ayahuasca was the first plant medicine I ever took in my life, so um, yeah, and I definitely think we have a lot to learn. That's what I know. We have a lot to learn as Westerners, the globalization of ayahuasca and what is happening with that. But I can say one thing is like, um, I think if people put safety at the forefront above anything else, you know, above cultural practices, indigenous practices, whatever that is, putting somebody's safety and screening them properly. That is what, my values are, is like, no matter how I'm practicing, is this the right container for somebody? And someone, when I work with people, I'd say, I empower them to be like, you really need to sit with yourself and ask yourself, what type of setting is the most supportive for my intention? Because maybe it's not a Maloka, pitch black Maloka full of 30 people. Maybe it's a one-on-one in the daytime. And, I've had both of those experiences and some other things in between. So we're in a time where the person who's healing or whatever's happening, they have a choice, and I just really think it's important that people know that and they can make the right choice for them.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Aya, for the work that you're doing and for exploring these frontiers and helping to merge them together. It's, I think I agree with you. I think that having a trauma-informed approach to working with plant medicine is a really important thing. And it's easy to get lost in the deep end where it can be re-traumatizing or, maybe not helpful in the same way that being a little bit more grounded and mindful of safety and of set and setting, having those things in mind can really help to bring out the healing potential of all this. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for being on The Vital Point again.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all the work you're doing, and thank you for building this awesome platform, so that other people can learn a lot.
Always a pleasure. Well, definitely, check out Aya's work. She's very active on Instagram, The Multidimensional Journey, and there'll be links on the show page to find out more information to connect with her. But Instagram's another good option as well. So definitely follow her there as well. So until next time, thank you for joining us. Keep practicing, because that's the vital point. See you next time.